we had a discussion on what literature as ideology. Then second is called as the role of ideology in literature, and the third one which we talk about is called as the function of criticism. And the function of criticism, where we stated about what literary criticism. Literary criticism means what? The meaning of literary criticism is called as analyzing literature, right? Analyzing literature, and that should go beyond just looking at the story. Looking means it's stated that when you analyze the literature, it should go beyond what? Just looking at the story. Means you shall not read the literature like the story you read. You should go beyond, right? You try to analyze how, what, when, who, right, which. So all such kind of a question must be, analyzing the literature. That's what is known as a criticism, literature criticism. So let's say that critics means somebody who criticizes the literature. So critics should consider the history and the social condition, right? So when a book was written, so for example, you talk about understanding how class, rich class, poor class, how class affects the characters in a story. How class affects the characters in a story and can give, deeper thought into its meaning, isn't it? So that's why when we talk about the function of criticism, we are just talking about nothing but the analyzing literature. And analyzing literature doesn't mean that read the literature. You should go beyond to that. Got the point? Next, fourth is called as a literature and a class struggle. So when we talk about literature and class struggle, what do we find out? We find out that literature often reflects what? Often presents or reflects the conflict, the opposition or the two different ideas, right? So literature often reflects the conflict between what? Different social classes, right? Different social classes means like we talk about rich class and poor class, right? Conflict between them. So many stories you would find out that represent the wealthy class values, right? But can also give a voice to the poor, isn't it? So conflict indicates that there are two classes that have a disagreement on a particular thought, right? But at the same time, means it is not apt that the stories only reflect to the wealthy class values and also give a supportive voice, right? A voice to the poor, right? So you should also give voice for the rich, or vice versa. Vice versa means you shall not give only voice for the rich. You shall also give voice for the poor, right? A good critic can identify how a book supports. So what is the job of the critics? The job of the critics is to support or fight against these class struggles. These class struggles means you talk about how the poor people struggle, right? So then the fifth one is called as a literature as mediation. What do we mean by mediation? That called as mediator. Mediation is called as a mediator. Like you can say, literature connects the real economic world with what? Cultural ideas, economic and culture, right? So both can connect it because of the literature, isn't it? So therefore, it is indicated that literature connects the real world, means where in the economic world with the cultural ideas. Okay, so let me give you an example to that. Let's say that a novel can shape our views of reality, right? Our views of reality that can be shaped by whom? A novel. Sometimes hiding the struggles that exist in a society, right? Struggles that present in the society that are hidden also. Hidden by whom? Hidden by the situation. But the novel presents that reality. right? It can also, however, you can say that it can also reveal, Nobel can also reveal what means the conflicts and allow reader to question societal norms. Societal norms means the rule that reflects or that applies in the society, right? So, and means who Nobel does that, right? So then the sixth one is called as the historical context, the historical context of literary forms. When we talk about, there are different types of literature, isn't it? So like realism, or you talk about modernism, realism, modernism, postmodernism. So they come from specific social condition. When you talk about realism, when you talk about modernism, so they come from specific, means you can say social conditions. Like let's say that realism. Realism might focus on what? Focus on the everyday lives of the people. Realism focus on what? Everyday lives of the people in a certain period, while modernism might highlight what? Feelings of confusion and alienation. Alienation is called as unfamiliar in a rapidly changing society. You are not means familiar with the changing society. You are not, acquainted with the means reality, isn't it? So that's called as the historical context of literary forms, isn't it? So if you talk about that criticism as a political act, right? So we find out that critiquing literature, or criticizing literature, it is nothing but a what? A political action. Criticizing literature is nothing but a political action, right? Or political stunt, you can say, because it examines, right? What examines? So you can say that critiquing literature examines the beliefs that shape the society, right? So the society has the belief, and what you are trying to do, you test the you test the means ideas of the society, isn't it? Let's say that by analyzing literature means literature criticism, right? By analyzing literature, critics can show how stories support, how stories challenge whom the ruling class interest, right? And making criticism a way to advocate for change, a way to advocate for change, right? So, all total, if you talk about that, Eagleton clearly describes that literature is not separate from society or social and political life, right? So it is a part of the larger and a larger ideological structure. Larger ideology means a set of ideas, or you can say structure of the ideas of its time, right? By applying Marxist criticism means the the thoughts, the ideas, the beliefs of the Marx, right? We can see how literature either maintains, there are two choices, either maintains or questions these structure. Which structure? The structure of the literature, right? And also you can say Marxist criticism onto it. Okay, so and helping us to understand the society better, isn't it? So if I talk about that historical context of Marxist criticism, you can say that in the last 10 years, many works that have explored, that have presented Marxist ideas. So Marxist ideas in where? The Marxist ideas in art and literature, isn't it? So we are talking about the in literature in the last 10 years, you would find out the writing of many different authors that have presented Marxist ideas in art and literature. So, and these works often have problems, right? So, what are they? Let's say that if I talk about the history of Marxist criticism, we find out after 1917, we would find out cultural ideas and politics. Cultural ideas and politics were closely connected, right? So we were talking about 1917 and after that. So cultural ideas and politics were closely connected, and we were talking about especially in Russia, right? Not only Russia but also Germany. In Germany, so important thinkers means called as means writers or means ideology makers. So important thinkers like Trotsky and Brecht. Trotsky and Brecht, they were part of this period. This period means that the period after 1917 when the cultural ideas and politics were closely connected. So, but when Stalin took power, Stalin, isn't it? So Stalin is a famous, you can say that a politician. So who took power? Art was controlled to its art was considered to what? To fit political goals, right? So when we talk about that, what means art and literature, right? And we pointed that what means in Russia and in Germany, thinkers were there. We talk about what the historical context of Marxist criticism. Uh, in that historical context of Marxist criticism, we talk about what in the last 10 years, what happened. Now, many works have explored Marxist ideas in art and literature. However, they often have problems. Who have often problems or who often have the problems? You can talk about that writers or thinkers or those who write many works. So they have problems. And what are the problems? We find out after 1917. So cultural ideas and politics both were closely connected. So, and especially in Russia and Germany. So important thinkers like who? Trotsky and Brecht. So they were part of this period. Which period? The period which is called as a 1970, after 1970, right? So, but when Stalin took power, what he tried to do? Now he tried to control, right? What did he try to control? The art. He tried to control art. And how did he control art? Now he controlled art means to fit political goals, right? Or you can say art was controlled to fit political goals, right? So some thinkers, you can say that like George Orwell, some thinkers like Orwell, who tried to keep art free from politics, right? So you can take the example that George Orwell who tried to free the art from politics, right? Or politics. So, and after 1956, when Stalin's control weakened, right? Stalin's control weakened. Weakened means called as a, you find out that the Stalin unable to control more or much. That is what called as weakened. So because he was trying to control art to, fit in the politics, isn't it? Now, when his control was weakened, discussion about literature and you can talk about politics opened up again, right? So literature and politics discussion opened up again, and thinkers like Sartre, right? So again, you can talk about that. Sartre is another thinker. So thinkers like Sartre who explored that how literature can be relevant with being complex. Being complex means being difficult or challenging. So, and after 1956, you would find out after 1970 or in 1970s, after the radical movement, right? Radical movements of the 1960s, a new generation of thinkers came out, right? We talk about the thinkers like Orwell, thinkers like Sartre, right? Who try to support the arts, isn't it? And try to free from politics. But after 1970s or during 1970s, a new generation of thinkers came out, but they became disconnected from revolutionary movement. Disconnected. They are separated. They often focused too much on what? Too much on theories rather than the real world classes. right? Rather than you can say that the real world issues, isn't it? So that's what you would find out means the ideas about the Marxist criticism. So, what are the issues that you generally find out, right? So, which we will discuss in the further class, right? But if you observe that what means, if I put some questions, how are literature and ideology connected? So, or do you consider that literature only reflects the ideas of its time, or can it challenge them? So, these are the couple of the questions that answer all such kind of information, right? And here, Terry Eagleton's contribution is what? Now, Terry Eagleton is a key figure, main character in a modern Marxist criticism. Right. He argues that the literature shape people's views of society. However, he struggles with the defining. He struggles. He finds challenging to define his role as a critic, often making his writing very difficult and hard to understand, isn't it? So, and if you talk about critic of Eagleton's work, Eagleton's work is very valuable, right? Or no? For what? For understanding how literature connects or relates to the ideology. Still, critics say he focuses too much on what famous literature, right? Famous literature and overlooks what overlooks popular culture, isn't it? And his views possibly appear to deterministic. Deterministic means what? Definitely supposed to be done, right? So and are called as a very surety. You can say his views are possibly appear like what very surety. So meaning he might not allow for enough individual creativity in literature. So that's what. And final wording is what? While Eagleton's approach is important, right? It has its a limitation. Limitation means not broad. So it raises question about how literature influences society, but sometimes misses alternative voices and radical ideas that could, enrich our understanding of literature, isn't it? So that's what all.